And those of you who are in the room, if I could ask you please to put your mobile phones on silent or turn them off. And if the fire alarm goes off, it's not a drill, it's the real thing, so please leave by the marked fire exits. This committee meeting is being live streamed. It is also being recorded, and the link to the live stream can be found on the council's website, www.tendringdc.gov.uk/live meetings. For the purpose of the recording, I will introduce everyone. I'm Councillor Maria Fowler, the Chairman of the Planning Committee, and I will introduce the members of the committee separately. Councillor Richard Everett.
Evening, Chairman.
Councillor Bernard Goldman.
Evening, Chair.
Councillor Adrian Smith.
Evening, Chair.
Councillor Geeta Sudra.
Good evening, Chair.
Councillor Anne Wiggins.
Good evening, Chairman.
And my Vice Chairman, Councillor John White.
Good evening, Chairman.
Thank you, members. The council officers assisting the committee this evening are from Committee Services, Katie Coppenall, from Leadership Support, Chris Bailey, and the Head of Democratic Services, Mr. Keith Simmons. From Planning Services, Planning Officers Amy Lang and Oliver Ashford, our Planning Manager, Mr. John Pateman-G, our Director of Planning, Mr. Gary Guyver, and our Planning Solicitor, Mrs. Joanne Fisher. There are no changes to the agenda running order. The application will be presented by the officer, followed by public speaking in the order of the applicant or agent, any members of the public who have already asked to speak for or against the application, then a speaker from the town or parish council, and then finally the ward councillor. Members of the committee will then have a chance to question the officer. Once all the questions are answered, the committee will then debate. When all the points are discussed, finally I shall ask if we have a resolution and call for a proposer and a seconder, and the committee will then vote according to normal rules. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions. Please, Katie.
We've received apologies from Councillor Alexander, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. The minutes of the last meeting, which was held on Tuesday, the 4th of March. Have you all had a look at those, members? Yeah. Could I have a proposer for those? Councillor Wiggins, seconder. Councillor Everett. Are we all in favour that I accept these as a true record? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, on item 24001910 it's an application from my own parish, and I'm going to personally declare an interest just in case it could be considered that I was biased. So I shall leave the room when you discuss that item.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Wiggins?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to declare an interest on item 5, which is the land adjacent to 55 Church Road, Elmstead, 24//01507/full. I'm not predetermined and I will be staying in the room. It is in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggins. Are there any other declarations of interest? Thank you, members. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Rule, Procedure Rule 38. Are there any, Katie?
No, none, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case then, we move now to our first application, item 5 on the agenda. A1 24/01507 full, land adjacent to 55 Church Road, Elmsted. And to present this item for us this evening, our officer Amy Lane. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Okay, so this application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 6 self-build bungalows at land adjacent to 55 Church Road in Elmsted. The application is before members at the request of Councillor Scott on the basis that the application is considered contrary to the Elmsted Market Neighbourhood Plan policies. The Neighbourhood Plan is now fully adopted and therefore carries full weight in the decision-making process alongside our adopted local plan. Officers are recommending approval for the reasons explained within the report and summarised in this presentation. The application relates to a parcel of land approximately 0.5 hectares in size, located on the eastern side of Church Road to the northern edge of the settlement of Elmsted Market. There are existing residential dwellings to the south and west of the site and open countryside to the north. And here's an aerial image showing the site in context. Directly opposite and extending slightly further north is the recent Pavilion View housing development. This slide shows the relationship of the site with the defined settlement boundary of Elmsted, together with the established protected trees along the southern boundary and some new TPO trees along the site frontage. So the site lies outside but directly adjacent to the defined settlement boundary for Elmsted. As the application seeks planning permission for self-build properties, adopted local plan policy LP7 is of primary relevance. The development is located directly adjacent to the settlement boundary, and Elmsted Market is categorised as a rural service centre. The application is accompanied by a self-build declaration form and needs statement in support of the development, and the application is therefore considered to comply with the requirements of LP7. The neighbourhood plan itself is silent on self-build and custom-built homes, and there are no specific neighbourhood plan policies relevant to the assessment of the principle of a development of this nature. So next up we have some site photos. This shows a view looking north on Church Road. The application site is to the right of the image, and the green arrow shows the broad position of a pedestrian crossing proposed as part of the application, linking the development to the existing footpath access through the cricket pavilion and onto the primary school and planned allotments. And this is a view of the entrance to the Pavilion View development directly opposite the site. And then this is a view looking north again on Church Road, showing the site frontage and existing vegetation to the right-hand side of this image. And this is a view of the boundary of the application site with number 55 Church Road. This is a Google Street View image just to give you a wider view of the site and 55 Church Road from the entrance to the Pavilion View development. And again, this is a Google Street View image just to give you a wider view looking south down Church Road with the rear of the Pavilion View development to the right-hand side of the screen and the application site to the left. And then a couple of photos from within the site. This is an image of the boundary with number 55 Church Road, currently enclosed by a brick wall which is to be retained. This is from within the site again, looking towards the front of the site, and then 55 Church Road is to the left-hand side of the image. You can just about see one of the protected trees in that shot there to the left, and then at the site frontage you can see the larger trees there which are now TPO'd. and that's looking along the site frontage with 55 Church Road and the other properties beyond in the far view. So this is an extract of the existing and proposed tree plan that accompanies the application. This shows the extent of vegetation to be removed along the site frontage, which will facilitate access to the site. As you can see, the 4 newly TPO trees are to be retained. Next up, we have the proposed site layout. So the development comprises 6 detached 3-bedroom bungalows. 2 new accesses are to be created, one serving plot 1, and then there's a central private driveway serving the other 5 properties. Each property will be served by sufficient parking and private amenity space, and the frontage of the dwellings will remain open with soft landscaping only. The majority of the boundaries will be enclosed by estate railings and landscaping, with 1.8 metre close boarded fencing featuring within the individual gardens dividing the plots. This is an extract of all the front elevations of the development, which demonstrates variation in the appearance but overall a cohesive design. And then next up we have the main considerations relevant to the application. So there's several to be looked at as part of the assessment, and that's all covered in detail within the officer report. Officers are content that the scale, layout and detailed design of the proposed development will deliver a good standard of amenity for future residents while safeguarding the amenities of existing residents in the adjacent dwellings. Conditions are recommended removing permitted development rights for any additional fencing or enclosures other than those shown on the proposed plans, and also removing permitted development rights for additions or alterations to the roof of the dwellings. This will allow the LPA control over future development to ensure residential amenities are protected and in the interests of visual amenity. The development will not result in material increase or harmful impact in terms of traffic movements. We have no objection from the Highway Authority, and matters of access, highway safety, parking can all be secured by conditions as included within the recommendations. Matters of archaeology, environmental protection, drainage, foul sewage disposal and sustainable construction and energy efficiency techniques can also be dealt with via appropriately worded conditions. I'm now going to go into a bit of further detail of the 3 more complex considerations shown highlighted green in that list. So as explained, the site lies outside of the Elmstead Market development boundary. Neighbourhood Plan Policy ELM1 Part C states that development outside the SDB must comply with development plan policies managing development in the countryside. Local Plan Policy LP7 for self-build homes is one such policy, and the development complies, as explained, being directly adjacent to the settlement boundary of Elmstead, which is categorised as a rural service centre. The Self-Build and Custom-Build Housing Act sets out a duty on the LPA to provide enough serviced plots to meet the demand for our area. We're currently unable to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the Act, and therefore the benefits of delivering 6 self-build dwellings have been given slightly more weight in the overall planning balance of our recommendation. Neighbourhood Plan Policy ELM5 requires 30% affordable housing on developments of 6 or more. Our adopted Local Plan Policy LP5 requires 30% affordable housing on developments of 11 or more. The Neighbourhood Plan is silent on self-build homes. Self-build homes are not open market homes and are a type of affordable housing. Therefore, the development is not caught by these policy, and an affordable housing contribution is not considered applicable to this application. Neighbourhood Plan Policy ELM7 states that new residential development will be expected to include in their housing mix a majority of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom dwellings. However, it's considered unreasonable to apply these requirements to a self-build scheme when the end user and their specific needs are set and the property is not part of the open market. So the principle of development is considered acceptable and the recommendation is subject to a condition securing the development as self-build. Next up, we have the landscape and character impact, including important views. So Elmsted Market Parish Council object on the basis that the development will result in a significant adverse impact on an identified important view number 15. View 15 identifies the northerly view from Church Road away from the development site. The development is highlighted in yellow on this plan extract here, with view number 15 pointing north. So the development site is not within or in the direction of the identified important view. The proposed development requires the removal of existing trees and hedgerow along the site frontage to facilitate the creation of the 2 new accesses as explained previously. And this will result in a degree of harm to the semi-rural character of the area from the reduction of vegetation and the introduction of additional built form from the dwellings and associated hardstanding. However, the mature protected trees will remain, providing screening and softening of the development on approach from both directions. Furthermore, the dwellings proposed are single-storey in height and located directly opposite and adjacent to existing properties. The roadside vegetation to the north of the site will be retained, and any glimpses of the development through that vegetation will be against a backdrop of the existing dwellings beyond. Views of the development on approach from the south will be in the context of existing residential development on both sides of the road. The development will not appear as extending beyond or protruding into the open countryside beyond the existing built form of the Pavilion View development opposite. So again, as explained earlier, there are several protected trees along the southwestern boundary, and in addition to these, during the course of the application, a new TPO has been made in respect of 4 oak trees across the site frontage. The development includes new tree and hedgerow planting within and around the boundaries of the site, and there will be a minor incursion into the root protection area of tree T8, which is a maple along the southern boundary, and I've highlighted that with the pink star. However, that intrusion will not cause any harm to the long-term health of the tree. Specialist construction techniques are proposed to further minimise potential damage to the protected roots of the protected oaks along the site frontage. The recommendation includes a condition to secure a detailed method statement and tree protection plan, together with details of the hard and soft landscaping. So, as the site area is no larger than 0.5 hectares and the development comprises of 6 self-built dwellings, the biodiversity net gain is not applicable to the application. A proportionate financial contribution towards RAMs and biodiversity mitigation enhancements can be secured via conditions and form part of the recommendation. In terms of protected species, the accompanying ecology report identifies the need for further reptile surveys in order to fully comply with policy and legislation requirements. So, subject to the submission and assessment of an acceptable reptile survey setting out sufficient mitigation measures, and the receipt of no objection from Essex County Council Place Services Ecology, officers are satisfied that the development could be delivered without resulting in any harm to protected sites or protected species. So, in conclusion, the scale, layout and appearance of the proposed dwellings are considered acceptable and will not result in any overriding harm to visual amenity, landscape character or the overall character of the area, having regard to the context of the site, directly adjacent to existing dwellings and the recent development at Pavilion View opposite. The application has been assessed against the policies contained within the adopted Elmsted Market Neighbourhood Plan and is not considered to result in any material conflict that warrants refusal of planning permission. Subject to the acceptable reptile survey, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And now we go to public speaking. Our first speaker on this item is Beth Deacon-Bates, speaking on behalf of the applicant. If you'd like to take a seat by the microphone, and when you push the button and the red light comes on, you have 3 minutes. The middle button.
Lovely. Okay. Good evening. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to speak at this committee on behalf of the clients, the families of Massink, Chantry and Miles, who have asked me to do so as they either are engaged with care and commitments or feel too emotionally involved to appropriately speak on their proposed homes. These 3 families want to take the opportunity to utilise their land to provide homes affordably to meet their current needs, as well as allowing them the opportunity to future-proof their potential new homes as they age in this sustainable village that they call home. How else could they affordably live in such proximity together in homes that accommodate their needs? Their site is in a sustainable location and certainly makes for effective use of land, aligning with the revised NPPF. As set out in my planning statement and the office's report, the site certainly aligns with the policies in the local plan too. As for the adopted neighbourhood plan, the policy map has not provided this site with a designation. It does not form part of the green ring, has not been identified as a green landscape buffer or a local gap. It falls beyond the nature recovery network and is not a local green space. However, the families do still want to provide a beautiful setting that protects the on-site trees and have done so by ensuring the root protection areas have been carefully considered in the layout to ensure the retention and protection of all the TPOs. Turning back to the sustainability and meeting the family's own identified needs, firstly, the site abuts the settlement boundary, providing for direct footpath links into the centre of the village. This family, like the 3 families, they have strong family connections to this village already. Regarding the plots, each of the families have had direct input into the design of each plot, and this can clearly be seen in each of the pairings. You can see which family has designed which pair. Although the families have had direct input differently, you can see that the whole scheme is cohesive and does respond well to the neighbourhood plan's design code. This last point is really important because they have designed these homes to meet their own needs, what they need to live comfortably together. Their own needs are ranging from the size of their household, their lifestyle with working from home, requirements for separate sleeping arrangements, and space to allow for carers or extended family to stay. Also, they want to consider adapting their homes, and this is really important given the government's announcement regarding cuts to disability benefits. The families want to live together to depend on their own support networks. And therefore, I close this statement by thanking the committee and hearing me speak on my client's behalf. And I hope that the committee recognise that these self-builders have their own needs and that this is an affordable means for them to provide some security as they continue to age. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Deacon-Bates. That was exactly 3 minutes.
Don't know how to turn it off. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
That's all right. And the next speaker is the ward member, Councillor Gary Scott. Councillor Scott, you know where the button is. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, Councillors, Officers. It's nice to be back here after a couple of weeks ago. I am speaking tonight not for or against the application, but to make sure that councillors are aware that this is outside the settlement boundary and there will be additional traffic movements on Church Road, which is well used by residents who attend the church, visitors to Pavilion View, the cricket club and the dangerous crossroads at the junction of Church Road and School Road and A133 crossroads. Yet again, nothing is mentioned at all about improving the junction to make it safer for residents who are going to live in Church Road to cross safely in that crossroads. The previous application 3 odd weeks ago, I mentioned about the said same crossroads. It's really serious. Residents who do not want to navigate this junction would have to travel down Holly Way to the other junction on the A133, where the pedestrian crossing should be and where Elmsted Market Parish would like it to be. We are receiving many applications in Elmsted Market, and where new residents will use this already busy crossroads, I'm really disappointed that there's nothing to mention about that. All construction, traffic, residents and deliveries will use this crossroads. No mention from Essex Highways yet again. But the Parish Council mentions this in their objection on page 32 of your papers. This is not to mention no mention about play equipment monies in Elmsted Market. Well, Elmsted Market is desperately in need of additional play equipment, and so would it be good if there was some sort of financial contribution towards the new community centre and play equipment and towards any pedestrian crossing on the A133, desperately needed by members of the public there. The overall traffic movements on Church Road and Holly Way will increase slightly, so any support to make the crossroads safer and additional play equipment to benefit our residents in our area and to approve this. So if councillors are moved to approve this application, then I would also suggest maybe further tree and hedgerow planting. Instead, as we're taking the load away for access, is additional tree planting on site. This will benefit the community of Elmsted Market and surrounding areas. Please do take note of the comments made by the Parish Council and their reference in terms of self-build. I think in the report, on page 31, ELM 5, 6 and 7, the Council confirmed at a meeting on the 7th of November that the neighbourhood plan policies apply for all self-builds. So please make a note of that. I would also like to see additional energy-saving measures such as solar panels on the roofs and air source pumps and water conservation schemes. These self-builds should set a precedent by having heavy and friendly environmental policies, so it would be a precedent set across our district. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I'll just ask the officer if there's anything that you would like to come back on from the speakers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. The sustainability measures in construction, that forms part of the condition. Open space contributions, they're not being requested on developments of this scale, only major developments. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, members, over to you. Questions for the officer, Councillor Smith.
Sorry, if I just start off with, if it wasn't brought in by Councillor Scott, we wouldn't be here tonight. They would have approved.
That's correct.
Is it okay if I go a little further? I noted that the neighbourhood plan for self-builds is not covered on this. If this wasn't self-builds, would this still have been approved?
The neighbourhood plan is silent in respect of self-build. So, of course, the self-build policy of the district plan engages. If this wasn't self-build, your policy allows development adjacent to settlement boundaries of a market nature as well as a self-build nature. So, unless anyone corrects me, I don't believe there would be, if it was a market scheme, it would still be in accordance with your current policy in terms of settlement boundaries. It would be delegated to officers to make that decision. I'm not.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This question of self-build, it's going to be a very interesting one. I wonder if everybody is aware what self-build means and what are the ramifications to it. I was going to ask Head of Planning, what physically does it mean? Does it mean that there is a small estate where everybody building on that estate can build the property themselves rather than having a building company build it? There is another application in front of us tonight where self-build seems to override a lot of our other plans, and that does worry me. So, what physically does self-build mean in the terms of the plan?
So, what was that noise? That was an echo. I sound awful with an echo. I do apologise. Ultimately, the self-build has a definition within the Self-Build Act. Self-build and custom house building means the building or completion by individuals, associations of individuals, or persons working for those individuals or associations. And those houses are then occupied by the individual. So it's not a case of the individual builds their own house, they have to physically put all the bricks in themselves. They can employ association or others to do that work for them. Certainly, if I was building my own house, I wouldn't have a clue what to do, so I would employ people to do that. It does not include the building of a house on a plot acquired from a person who builds the house wholly or mainly to plans or specifications decided or offered by that person. So there is a capture to stop the larger developers kind of using it as a loophole, but ultimately, which is why you have small scale schemes of self-build. There's no limit to how many self-build might be within a scheme. There's no capture to that. It comes down to the merits of obviously it being self-build for an individual who may or may not be employing others to build their home for them, and they will then occupy that property.
There's a second question, Chairman, if you could take it. While we were there, this one would be to Mrs. Lang. While we were there and we walked around the site, we found that there is definitely a working ditch right across the entrance, and it's a continuation of the ditch from outside number 55. Unfortunately, that screen's not working tonight, and I can't quite see on there. Is the proposal that that ditch will be continued through? Is it the dark line that I can see on there from this distance?
Essentially, yes. So it's just a standard highway verge ditch. It doesn't actually have kind of water running through it or anything like that. It's just for surface water discharge from the highway. And the block plan shows that that is to be retained. Members could consider an additional condition to perhaps pipe the ditch and make sure it continues for free flow. But yeah, there's no concerns in that regard. And because of the scale of the development, it's only minor. We don't require surface water drainage strategy for the scheme, and there's no consultation required with the lead flood authority. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Whilst it's wide open for any drainage at 55, it probably feeds the roots of the trees, the TPOs that are in there. But I would hate to see anything blocking that off, because undoubtedly in heavy weather it does have water in it. So, thank you for that.
Just to come back on that again, just for an additional peace of mind, in terms of the soft and hard landscaping scheme, officers can secure permeable surfacing to any of the additional hard surfaced areas to help with surface water flooding as well.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Chairman.
On the 20th of January, ECC Place Services Ecology put in a holding objection. Is that still the position? Because I thought you said that there were no objections from Place Services.
So there's no objection from other statutory consultees. So Place Services includes archaeology as well. So there's no objection from them subject to conditions. The recommendation is made subject to the submission of an acceptable reptile survey. So the holding objection that you mentioned from Place Services Ecology, that remains yes. So this recommendation, although it is an approval, it wouldn't be a case that the application would be determined straight away. It's got the 12-month time frame to allow the reptile survey to be undertaken at the appropriate time, submitted to the local planning authority, and then we would engage with Place Services Ecology again to make sure that that's acceptable and that we secure any further mitigation measures. Thank you.
So just to clarify, what they said in their objection was the results of these surveys are required prior to determination, because paragraph 99 of the ODPM Circular 06/2005 highlights that it is essential that the presence or otherwise of protected species and the extent that they may be affected by the proposed development is established before the planning permission is granted. Otherwise, all relevant material considerations may not have been addressed in making the decision. They go on to say, this will enable the LPA to demonstrate compliance with its statutory duties, including its biodiversity duty under Section 40 of the NERC Act 2006 as amended, prevent wildlife crime under Section 17 Crime and Disorder Act 1998. So are we acting ultra vires if we go ahead prior to determination with that situation with the condition?
So we are not approving this application. You're not granting permission. The permission is granted at the point of a decision being issued, which means what we're asking you to do is to resolve to approve the application subject to that matter being resolved. Of course, if that matter is not resolved, the permission is not granted. Therefore, we have not overstepped. And if it is not resolved, then I've got two options. One, refuse it. B, we'll end up coming back here. So your resolution is not to simply go away and allow officers to approve subject to the resolution that you're making here. You're not granting permission here. You never grant permission in this forum. You are always making a resolution for the officers to follow. And our resolution in this case is that we'll follow it, but we have an exception here that we're making very clear to you, which is entirely in accordance with what you've just said. So we are happy with our position in that respect. We are just simply asking members to deal with everything else, and we will deal with that one issue with your guidance.
Thank you. So that basically requires a condition to ensure, usually a Grampian condition, I think I'm correct in saying, to allow that to be able to happen.
No, we are asking for a survey to be carried out before we grant permission. So we're asking for the information. So in effect, you could argue we've got an application in front of you that has outstanding information. We are asking you to deal with everything, which kind of means we've got everything else resolved and buttoned up. Ultimately, we still need to deal with that outstanding information, but that outstanding information is subject to having surveys done at the right time of the year. So rather than unnecessarily hold off on every other issue, which gives uncertainty to the applicant, we felt it was a good idea to bring this forward to you to have the pathway set out in respect of deal with everything else, the principle and everything as a resolution, but also to resolve that we can solve the survey issue in the right time period, and we will wait for that to happen, and then after that we can then issue hopefully an approval if all singing and all dancing and we have Place Services that agree, the experts that we employ, or if we don't have that to be satisfied with the circular, if we don't have that satisfaction, Therefore, we will then look at the option, which is option 2, which is to refuse the matter, or indeed, I have always got the right to bring it back here if I needed to, but I don't think I would need to, because ultimately the choice is simple. We are either in accordance with our duty or we're not. So I need enough information to be in accordance with, which is what we set out, or we'll be looking at refusal. It's hopefully relatively straightforward in that sense.
Thank you.
Councillor Goldman, and then if there are no further questions after Councillor Goldman, we'll go into the debate then.
Thank you, Chair. If the self-build is given the go-ahead, is it going to be of non-standard construction, or is there a set criteria for its aesthetic look?
There's no standard construction techniques that have to be used in a self-build to make it a self-build as such. What members are looking at in terms of the proposed plans, that's the overall visual appearance of the properties. There is a condition included in the recommendation for specific details of the materials and finishes themselves. You throw me off there, John. He said something about building regs as well, so that be included. But yeah, there's no specific requirements in terms of what it's constructed of, but the recommendation also includes a condition to secure the properties as self-build as well.
Thank you.
Members, are there any further questions? If not, we are now in the debate, and I will be looking for a proposal. Which way we want to go with this one? Councillor White.
Without going into the whys and wherefores and how we're going to approve it, there's a fundamental thing that worries me here. We as a district council have been pushing hard to get all the parishes to draw up their own neighbourhood plans. And Elmsted, one of the first, certainly one of the early ones, have gone ahead and done just that. And here we've got an application which they feel does not satisfy their neighbourhood plans. I find it very difficult. We've got the national scheme of things, and now we've got the parish scheme of things, of what they want. Now, it would appear from what we've heard that Elmsted have done a very good job, but they haven't mentioned what we're talking about tonight about self-build, something that they've missed out. But we've got this balance between the two. We know we've got to comply with national, and we would very much like to comply with Elmsted's parish. And I find it very, very difficult. The outstanding thing for me is the number of properties that can be built without paying any Section 106 monies. We've heard tonight that Elmsted would like to take it down to 6, and whereas nationally, we know in our local plan we've got it much higher than that. So I find it very, very difficult if we're saying to parishes, you tell us what you want, and the first time one comes up, we say, yeah, but we're going to refer to national now, and yours won't apply. I find that particularly difficult.
Mr. Pateman-G. Oh, sorry, I thought you'd indicated that you wanted to speak. Sorry. Anything further, members? Councillor Everett.
Thanks, Chairman. As a self-builder myself of my own house, I fully understand the advantages and challenges that these folks are going to go through in building their own houses. And for that reason, I'm very, very keen to support such self-build entities. However, I also have the same concerns that Councillor White has about the neighbourhood plan. I myself advocating doing a neighbourhood plan in my parish council, and it worries me that we are, as a committee, potentially overriding the interests of some of those facilities within that plan. So I find myself in a very difficult position. I just don't know where I'm going on this at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. So, a lot of undecided faces. Mr. Peyton G.
Can I, obviously we support the idea of neighbourhood plans and the policies that they give us. They are a local level policy and often are very valuable and useful in our determination and balance. The neighbourhood plan has full weight. Our local plan has full weight. Ultimately, though, the neighbourhood plan did not pick up self-build as a specific policy. But what we're doing here is not overruling the neighbourhood plan, if you were to go with the recommendation before you, because ultimately this is not open market housing. If this was open market housing, it would be subject to the reduction of affordable housing that the neighbourhood plan has engaged. But because it's not that application type of housing, it is not considered, in your officer's opinion, and we have obviously gone through our policy team as well, to be captured in the same way because of the nature of being self-build and the provisions of self-build. Effectively, the argument is that all affordable housing comes from, if it was to be on the open market, if some big housing developer was going to develop housing, they'd be all up for the open market, but we capture 30% of that to become affordable housing, or less if the neighbourhood plan applied. A self-build house never gets to that imaginary market because we already have the individual who's going to live in it. So that's essentially the argument. And if I was to try and apply the neighbourhood policy to a self-build property with that argument going on, I do not recommend we would do that, because I do not think the neighbourhood plan would stand and be defendable, which is actually our plan. It is part of the development plan that we have. It would not, in our view, be robustly defendable at appeal. So therefore, I don't want to have a them and us in terms of a neighbourhood plan, local plan. It's all the development plan, and we have adopted that neighbourhood plan as part of our development plan. But ultimately, we also have to deal with the components within the two documents, and that is what is before members. I do appreciate the misunderstanding that may go on with regard to that, but please have my word that we have been quite clear and try to be very careful about this.
Thank you, Mr. Pateman G, for clarifying that. I did try, when we were on site today, to try and visualise in my mind what this is going to look like, because this is, I think, a very interesting scheme, and for the families that are going to be embarking on doing this, or employing somebody to do it, whichever, it's going to be quite an intriguing project. And I have to say, after looking at the site and trying to visualise what it's going to look like, I would support this application. I was in two minds before our site visit today with where to go with it, but after looking at this afternoon again online, had a further look at the application and some of the details, I would certainly be prepared to support the application for approval as per the conditions. So I don't know if any of my colleagues here have any further thoughts on that. Councillor Sudra.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to obviously Mr. Pateman G's explanation, I think I am happy to support this development and would support the recommendations as laid out.
Councillor Smith.
I would second that.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Sudra, as per our papers, to approve the application, and also the update sheet, which we all have copies of, which is the first item on the update sheet on page 1. So also a seconder, Councillor Smith. So if I could have a show of hands, please, members in favour to approve this application. So this is for approval. 1, 2, 3. Those against? And those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that application is approved. So we'll have a 5-minute break now, and we shall be back for the next item on the agenda in about 5-10 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back to TDC Planning Committee today on Wednesday the 19th of March. Item 6 on the agenda is application A2-24/1915/VOC land at Connaught Road, Wheelie. And to present this item for us, our planning officer Amy Lang.
Bear with. It doesn't like me anymore.
I think what we'll do is we'll cut the live stream and we'll have a look at the technical issues and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Yep. If you, we'll have go with the live stream again, Chris. We'll have another go. Okay. So welcome back, TDC Planning Committee on Wednesday, the 19th of March, 2025, and we're up to item 6 on the agenda, which is the land at Connaught Road, Wheelie, A224 stroke 01915 stroke VOC. And to present the application for us, our officer Amy Lang. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me okay? That one's working, yep. Okay, so this application is made under section 73, seeking to vary the approved plans condition of application reference 21 stroke 02014 stroke FUL to enable changes to the floor plans and elevations. The changes include 4 number high-level roof lights to facilitate the conversion of the loft space. The application which it's seeking to amend was allowed on appeal, and all of the conditions attached to that permission are attached to the appeal decision. The application is before members at the request of Councillor Harris, and we have an objection from Wheelie Parish Council, and 4 letters of objection have also been received. The concerns raised relate to the enlarged dwellings being out of keeping with the road and failing to provide sufficient parking. So the application site is located on the eastern side of Clacton Road to the north of Connaught Road, and the site is outside but directly adjacent to the settlement boundary. But the principle of development is established through the permission that's in place, allowed on appeal. This aerial view gives you a bit more context with existing residential development on 3 sides and the open field directly adjacent to the north, and then further residential properties beyond. The application references shown relate to similar bungalow development within Connaught Road. This is a site photo looking east into Connaught Road. And this photo shows a view, again looking east into the site where the approved development is currently under construction. Members would have noted from our site visit today that things have progressed since the photo taken here. This is a Google Street View image that I've included to show a wider view of the rear of the site and of the adjacent bungalows from Clacton Road across the open field. So this view is mentioned within the appeal decision, which I'll cover in a bit more detail. Members will note the visible roof lights to the rear and side roof slopes of the adjacent bungalows. Okay, so this is the approved and proposed site layout plan showing the linear arrangement of the development, setback garages and long driveways to the side of each property. All approved and proposed roof lights are positioned to the side roof slopes. So when it was originally approved, there were 2 high-level roof lights and a vaulted ceiling internally, and then the proposed site layout shows the 4 number roof lights now proposed, 2 on each side, to facilitate the loft conversion. Just a few side-by-side approved and proposed elevation plans, just to show the minor detail and minor alterations proposed in terms of the windows and doors. And highlighted on there also the roof lights. This is just an example of one of the ground floor plans as proposed. There's some slight reconfigurations internally to allow for a staircase to be added to gain access to the loft. And that's the first floor plans across all plots. So it would be provided with 2 loft rooms and a central store. So the material considerations relevant to the application. So as I mentioned, the principle of development has been established by the appeal decision, and that's under construction. The minor changes will not materially alter the overall appearance of the development, whilst maintaining features and finishes in keeping with the adjacent dwellings. Roof lights positioned to the side roof slopes, and they will not appear prominent or harmful from the adjacent field. The high-level position of the roof lights will not result in any overlooking or loss of privacy between the new dwellings or to neighbouring dwellings adjacent, and sufficient private amenity space is provided to serve the dwellings, including the additional accommodation proposed. In terms of the parking, the garage plus the length of the driveways provides 4 spaces per dwelling, amounting to 28 spaces overall. And considering that provision against the new parking standards, that's in excess, with the new parking standards requiring 22.75 spaces overall, including visitor parking. So B&G is not applicable to this Section 73 application as it was not applicable to the original. The RAMS contribution has been paid upon commencement of the development under the original permission. And just something to note, the internal works would not require planning permission once the properties are occupied. You can add internal rooms, convert your loft space, etc. without planning permission. In this instance, there is a condition on the appeal which seeks to control additions and alterations to the roof. So those additions and alterations that the appeal decision are seeking to control are dormer, window additions and roof light additions. And the reason for that condition was because of the visually exposed rear elevations in relation to the open field. So I've included that section of the appeal commentary and the condition itself. So the proposal was also considered to comply with the aims of that condition and the reasons for that condition, in that it won't be on the visually exposed rear elevations, they're on the side elevation, and overall it's not going to appear prominent or harmful, and it will maintain the existing character and appearance of the area, also having regard to the existing roof lights on the directly adjacent development. So yeah, the recommendation is approval, subject to conditions required to be copied across from the original approval, which will include the appeal decision conditions. So you'll see that they've now been copied across from the appeal decision onto the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Speakers for this application, there are 3. We'll start with the agent, Mr. Robert Pomery. Mr. Pomery, you know the drill, I believe, yes? If you'd just like to get yourself comfortable, and then when you hit the button and the red light goes on, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, members. My name is Robert Pomery, and I've been a chartered town planner for more than 30 years. I'm here to represent the applicants. The applicants, whilst constructing this lawful development, took the view that these properties were approved with significant roof space that was not being utilised, and felt that this could be a missed opportunity. To make use of this space and to provide natural light to it meant that planning approval to amend the approved scheme was needed to include some roof lights and some minor changes to the external design. The application has been made just simply to do that, and the applicants have no firm plans to make the roof space bedrooms. The space could be used for a variety of uses, such as a home office, study, or play space. To some extent, the actual use of the space will be a matter for the purchaser to decide. However, if the space was to be used as bedrooms, then the planning implications of that decision needed to be considered, and a key consideration of that would be the provision of off-street car parking. The parking requirement for a 5-bed dwelling, were that to be the case here, is 3 spaces for each dwelling plus 0.25 spaces for visitors. Were all 7 dwellings to become 5-bed units, the planning requirement for parking would be 23 spaces rounded up, and the scheme makes provision for 28. So the worst case scenario, were that to happen, would not only comply with the standard but exceed the required parking requirements for the site. It should also be noted that the changes to the internal layout and the use of the roof space are not development requiring planning permission. It is the roof lights in this case that are being applied for, along with some minor external design changes. Your officers have examined the proposals in some detail and considered whether the addition of the roof lights and the minor design changes result in any material harm to both the scheme itself and to neighbouring residential amenity. The officers have not found any harm and advise that the changes proposed are compliant with the local plan policy and consequently permission is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pomeroy. And the next speaker is from the Parish Council, from Wheely Parish Council, Councillor Christine Hamilton. Councillor Hamilton, if you'd like to take a seat and push the red button when you're ready, and you have 3 minutes.
Is that the right one? Excuse me. The proposed variation of condition 2 in this development on Connaught Road has raised several concerns among the residents and Wheely Parish Council. These concerns primarily revolve around existing infrastructure and parking issues which may affect the safety and accessibility of the road. Firstly, the properties approved for development were originally planned as 3-bedroom bungalows. However, the current plan to add 2 further rooms in the attic space, in effect creating 7 5-bedroom houses, significantly changes the character of the development and is not in keeping with the rest of the road. The introduction of larger homes disrupts the aesthetic consistency of the neighbourhood. Secondly, a resident has been advised by the builder that the positioning of the proposed properties has been altered, moving them forward towards the road. This change is not only cosmetic, but it substantially impacts the existing infrastructure. The footings of the new houses are now directly above the existing sewerage installation, raising concerns about potential damage and maintenance issues, and residents have been denied permission by the builder to inspect the integrity of the existing sewerage structure. Thirdly, the lack of adequate parking for each property will compel residents to park on the road. Connaught Road is narrow, and increased on-street parking will create hazards for vehicles accessing the length of the road. Large vehicles, refuse trucks for example, currently reverse into Connaught Road from Clacton Road due to their inability to turn around. The addition of parked vehicles will make this practice more dangerous or even impossible. It's crucial to consider access for emergency vehicles, as 5-bedroom properties will attract more resident vehicles than the approved 3-bedroom ones. The shift forward reduces frontage, further limiting off-road parking space, and I would suggest that that would also impact on the stated 4 parking spaces per property. Tendring District Councillors adopted parking standards for new residential developments outlined in the Essex County Council Parking Standards Design and Good Practice 2009. According to these standards, the recommended parking provision for a 5-bedroom house is a minimum of 3 parking spaces. These standards aim to ensure that off-street parking for new developments reduces on-street parking congestion, maintaining the safety and convenience of local roads. Currently, all residents of Connaught Road park their vehicles on their drives to avoid hindrance to other vehicles, particularly local authority or emergency vehicles. Wheely Parish Council agrees with the residents of Connaught Road who have valid concerns regarding the amendments to the proposed development, as I have detailed. It is essential that the committee considers
3 minutes
to ensure that the development proceeds in a manner that respects the existing community and complies with established standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. And our final speaker on this item is the ward member, Councillor Peter Harris. Councillor Harris, once you take your seat and you push the button, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, committee and officers. I won't need 5 minutes. Okay, I thought I'd start off by just sort of going over the history of the site. The site was put through for an application which was refused by TDC previously, It was, you know, the parish council were against it, the residents were against it, TDC were against it, and turned this application down, or the previous application down. It was outside of the boundary. We had proof of sufficient housing supply, and you know, it just wasn't needed. It was outside the boundary. That was a key point. And it was also visually harmful between the two villages of Little Clacton and Wheely Heath. So that green gap there, strategically, was an important area between those two villages. Otherwise, you know, the convergence of those means that there's one conurbation going right the way through. That visual appearance was hugely important, and that was the main reason why it was turned down. And you know, you have to ask yourself, you know, what is the point of red lines when, you know, we get overturned? You know, we spent 11 years looking at the local plan last time, only to be overturned at appeal. But at appeal, they viewed that site as 3-bedroom bungalows. Would they have made the same decision had they have had an application before them for 5-bedroom bungalows? And let's call them 5-bedroom bungalows because they've got rooms there and that's what they're likely to be used for. Would they have determined whether or not it was overdevelopment? And I think the frustrating thing, I've sat on the planning committee for 5.5 years, and the frustrating thing for me while I was there was what I used to term as mission creep. And it gets very frustrating when you get applications come in and then you get the variations and then you get amendments and etc. And it is extremely frustrating. The issues that have been discussed by and mentioned by the parish council chairman, the main one for me is with regards to parking. Parking is an issue. Indeed, the planning inspector said on approval, ensure that adequate parking is available and clear of highway. You know, the applicant has said, and the officer said that there is adequate parking. There is some debate and question whether that is the case. So if that is the case, and it is mindful of the planning committee to approve this, are there conditions that can be placed upon this to prevent vehicles being parked on that roadway? Residents have told me today that when vehicles park there, and then during the build, when builders' vehicles have parked in that road, it causes problems of access, problems, dust carts have not been able to get on site, they have to reverse down there anyway. Now the builders had listened and they've actually, to give them credit, have actually moved off site and are parking elsewhere. But the problem is if people park in that road, it actually restricts it and causes issues. There's no doubt about that. So for me, I think it is parking is the issue. The frustrations are mission creep, but we are where we are and we have to look at the application in front of us. I understand that. And, you know, planning is a matter of opinions. Yes, there are rules, there are guidelines with the MPPF and our local plan, but it is about opinions. And the opinion is that there are those of us that feel that this is overdevelopment and that there are traffic or parking issues, there are potential ones, and there are those, obviously the developer who says that there's nothing to see here, there's not going to be a problem. So are there, you know, I'd say to the committee, can you consider, discuss with offers whether there can be restrictions placed upon that roadway to prevent those issues? And I think the other points have been covered already by the parish council. So I've got nothing further to add there, other than my belief is that with a 5-bedroom development, it's going to be overdevelopment. It's not in keeping with the rest of that Connaught Road. And with my last words with mission creep, I know we're not looking at that, but my ideally hope that mission creep doesn't actually creep across the remainder of the fields that are there. So, but that's not a consideration for this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'd just like to ask the officer, Amy, if there's anything that, any comments made by the speakers that you would like to come back on? Mr. Pateman-G.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So in terms of the siting of the properties, this was subject to an enforcement investigation. The siting thus far has been checked and there has been found nothing wrong in terms of the positioning of the buildings, and therefore the availability of the free parking spaces to comply with the standards is considered at this time to be available and reasonable, and we have no reason to investigate that further. So we have the parking as far as we are concerned if these were all bedrooms. The position of the strategic gap or principle of this development or other matters associated with that, putting it bluntly, are gone. We are at the position that this, the appeal has taken that forward in the way it has. But what we are dealing with here is a particular type of planning application, which is a variation of a condition. And therefore we are looking at the specific change, which in this case is the roof lights. I'll go on to other things later if I need to, but ultimately the position is, as it's been set out in your papers, the internal conversion of these buildings is not actually within our control. They can subdivide living rooms, they can make what they wish in terms of number of bedrooms, just like I can do with my house if I really wanted to. But ultimately, the control is the position of the actual roof alteration itself, and that is what members I would recommend concentrate on.
Thank you, Mr. Payman G. Questions, members, for the officer? Who's going to start us off? Councillor Smith.
I feel this is becoming a habit now. I assume this wouldn't have come before us if Councillor hadn't brought this to us.
It is unlikely that it would have come before you, but ultimately it is before you. You are the decision maker. The scheme of referral has allowed this to come on this path, so it is here. You're the decision.
Councillor Everett.
Thank you. In your answer about the parking spaces, you inferred that there was sufficient parking spaces to accommodate 3 vehicles on each house. Is that correct, or am I paraphrasing you wrongly?
Let me just flip back to a plan that might be helpful. So each of the 7 properties has a garage, either internal, attached or detached. And then they've got quite long driveways as well. So we're looking at 4 spaces per property overall, which is why we've concluded that it actually exceeds the new parking standards set out in the latest document, and provides 28 spaces overall. So on the basis that they may be bedrooms, it does meet the new parking standards.
Thank you.
Any further questions, members? Well, we're going to debate then, if there's no further questions. While we're having a think about that one, I will just mention that I had a look at those roofs of those bungalows while we were there today, and I haven't got a problem. I haven't, and I've read through the report again, and the issues that are raised about the parking, I just don't get that. There isn't, and as Mr. Pateman has just said, what you do with these rooms inside, you wouldn't be requiring a planning application for. It's entirely up to you whether you want it to be a study, an officer bedroom, whatever you want it to be, gym or what. So I haven't got a problem with it. So I'm definitely supporting this one. So it's not a full application; it's a variation of condition. So further comments, please, members. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Like yourself, we've already approved these developments, whether we liked it or not. and this variation is so small to my way of thinking. It's not overlooking the next door property. Whether the people choose to keep them as 3-bedroom properties and, as you say, use it as a gym or an office or something upstairs, even if they decided to put 2 bedrooms up there, there is, in our present standard, sufficient parking spaces for them. And so if nobody else has got any any points on them under these circumstances, I'd be prepared to propose acceptance of them.
Thank you, Councillor White. So that's a proposal from Councillor White to approve this application. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith? So that would be to approve the application as per the recommendation on page 66 of our papers, plus the update sheet as well, which is at the bottom of page 1. So, and I have a show of hands, please, for approval for this application. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? None. Those abstaining? 2 abstentions. So this application is approved. Thank you, members. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes while people are leaving the room, and we're also going to... yes, we're going to be without our Vice Chair for this one. Welcome back to TDC's Planning Committee, Wednesday the 19th of March 2025, and we're up to item 7. And for those of you who may have missed it at the start, Councillor White has withdrawn from this item as he has declared an interest. And the item is A324/01910/full rear of 140 Point Clear Road, St Osyth, CO16 8JA. And to present this application for us, our officer, Oliver Ashford. Go ahead, Oliver.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. The application before members relates to the rear of number 140 Point Clear Road in St Osyth. The site is located on the northern side of Point Clear Road with Green and Grove to the west and is surrounded by residential development, Ripon form of development along Point Clear Road. So this outlines the site location plan as can be seen in red with the rest of the site in blue. And the Google Street View image showing the aerial view of the site. So the application seeks full planning permission for the subdivision of the site to form 2 additional building plots and the erection of 2 3-bedroom detached self-built bungalows, including 2 new vehicular access points onto Greenland Grove to serve both the new dwellings. So this just provides a bit more context in terms of the overall development around the application site. It's a fairly ribbon form of development, but there are some dwellings that have been granted on appeal, particularly at 172 Point Clear Road, which I'll come on to a bit later. So just some photographs outlining the sort of surrounds of the site. So at the moment it's set to grass. It's the former residential curtilage of 140 Point Clear Road. This shows the image looking back towards Point Clear Road. And you can see there's some clearance that's taken place on site already, and this just shows the context of the existing dwelling and in terms of the new development that's proposed. And this is looking towards Greenland Grove. Greenland Grove itself has sporadic forms of development to the rear, a farm and various outbuildings are located along the track. And this photo just shows the access that would be onto Point Clear Road. So in terms of the proposed drawings, so they are 2 self-built bungalows. As previously highlighted, we're not able to meet our self-build need at the moment, so the dwellings would help to meet that need. They're 3 bedrooms with a garage proposed. And this is the proposed block plan in terms of what's being proposed. There's a passing bay in between the 2 dwellings as well, which will help with traffic along the road. Certainly when visiting site, if you had a car coming the other way, it's quite difficult to navigate, so that will help to improve the situation on the surrounds of the site. Sufficient amenity space within the 2 rear gardens of the property, and parking as well. Soft landscaping will be secured by condition. Just in terms of the material considerations, then moving on to that, policy SPL2 sets out that outside of the settlement development boundaries, the council will consider any planning application in relation to the pattern and scale of growth promoted through the settlement hierarchy. So Point Clear itself doesn't have a settlement development boundary. However, there should be provision made in terms of the sustainable development principles of the surrounds of the site. Just want to point to 2 previous decisions. So there was a refusal in 2021, but it wasn't on the grounds of sustainable development. So it should be given due regard and material weight in terms of this application. There was then a subsequent approval of that application in 2023, which came before members in October of 23, and that was at 225 Point Clear Road. And in addition, there was an appeal for 172 Point Clear Road, which if I just go back to the Google Street View, I can highlight again. So that's where Fairview is. The inspector concluded that this site was within walking distance of local convenience shop and bus stops, and providing an alternative mode of travel to car for future occupiers. The erection was for a single dwelling would not be of a scale development that would be disproportionate to the size of the settlement. And it was considered that the proposed development would not cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area. In addition, just turning towards self-build, the site is not within the defined settlement boundary, as has been highlighted. but the applicants have registered on the council's self-build register with a view to carrying out the scheme themselves. Therefore, it's considered that the proposals accord with both national and local policy with regards to self-build. In terms of the proposed design, the proposed dwellings are a single story in nature of a scale and design that will appear as an infill plot in keeping with the scale of the residential developments in the locality. The plots are at an appropriate size and scale for their location. Sufficient spacing is retained around the host dwelling and proposed dwellings. So therefore, overall, on balance, the development will appear well spaced and blend well within the street scene. In terms of highways, there's no objection raised. Greenland Grove is a private access road with the passing bay, as previously mentioned, will help to improve access to and from the site. There's no trees on the site, but a soft landscaping scene will be secured by condition, and it's considered that the residential amenities of neighbouring properties are protected. So overall, the proposals are recommended for approval. I just want to draw members' attention to page 96 and 97. The conditions should read 12 and 13, and I have no further comments to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. And we have one speaker on this item, Mr. Peter Legrees. Peter, sorry to have kept you waiting all this time. You've been very patient.
Good. Thank you, Chairman. Members. Members, be aware when making a decision, you must take into account the material planning considerations of any particular case. In this instance, there are two fundamental arguments and issues that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, they're not dealt with within the report or the officer's presentation at the committee meeting, the members' site meeting this morning, or indeed just now. Those two considerations relate to the appeal decision for number 172, and there's also the planning permission that was granted number 225 Point Clear Road. I dealt with both of those cases. The appeal decision at number 172 was actually two appeals. The first appeal, the inspector dismissed the appeal on the basis of the failure to provide for a widening of Cow Lane. That's the next road up, 16 properties away from this one at Greenland Grove. But he did make it very clear that there will be no impact on the wider area, despite there will be open fields behind. In this instance, Greenland Grove is exactly the same as Cow Lane. We have included a vehicle passing bay to the same format. On the 172, the second appeal was allowed on that basis. We have followed the scheme to the identical circumstances as allowed on appeal. I did request to the officers and to Mr. Pateman G that a plan be provided tonight to members to show the appeal scheme. And members will see that the circumstances are identical. Therefore, as a material consideration for an appeal decision that was made less than a year ago, that hasn't been sufficiently provided to members to provide an appropriate and adequate consideration. The second aspect is that this application incorporates a vehicle passing bay. Now, as members saw, sitting on the bus, and the bus had to try and turn around at the bottom, there is no passing bay anywhere along that section of Greenland Grove. This scheme formally incorporates that which will be provided, and it is incorporated as the final condition on the agenda. Again, that is a material consideration that members must take into account, because that was the reason for the first appeal to be dismissed at 172, but the reason for the second appeal to be allowed. That has not been explained to members, and I am extremely disturbed with those circumstances. Equally, members will see that Parish Council say they object to one thing, but then no objection to another. And the final comment is they object especially, or would have no objections to the erection of a single dwelling, especially as access will be via a track offering single vehicle access and egress at any one time.
3 minutes.
That doesn't even incorporate the issue about the passing bay. The matters in this instance are identical to the appeal decision, and I would expect the committee to take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legrees. I'll now ask the officer if there are any comments that the officer would like to come back on. No? Okay. Questions for the officer? Councillor Smith.
I think it would be wrong for us not to mention that. So outside 172, what happened with that?
So we have made reference to those appeal decisions, so paragraph 8.15 of the committee report, and just to highlight in terms of the passing bay, that's been mentioned in terms of my presentation, and we recognise that as part of that previous appeal decision.
But with regards to outside number 172, is it exactly the same as was suggested?
Yeah, the scheme is as before you is similar to that was submitted as part of that appeal decision, and the applicant has followed the inspector's advice in terms of what they've submitted.
Councillor Goldman.
In regards to 172, just going back to, was that exactly the same as in for two dwellings, or was that for a single dwelling?
Yeah, there's two appeals, so there's two separate dwellings as part of that appeal. So yeah, there's two dwellings in total.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the officer on this application? If not, we'll go into debate. No further questions. So we're now in debate, so I will be looking for a proposal on this one. Councillor Everett.
Thank you. Given that we don't seem to have all of the information in front of us, particularly pointed out by the gentleman just speaking, are we in a position where we should possibly defer this decision until we do have all of the information in front of us? That's in relation to the planning inspector's position, because certainly when I like to look through planning inspectors' decisions to see the whole context rather than just the bit that happens to be presented to me, because often you find there are nuances that otherwise you miss. And the second part of this really is we've actually talked very little about the archaeological issues. And as I understand it, there is some concern in terms of archaeological issues. Are we doing the right thing in terms of not responding to those?
Yeah, just on the archaeological issues, there's no overriding concern, just that there's standard three conditions that we put as part of the conditions and recommendation section. So that's just that they would carry out archaeological trenching, those would be in forms of written scheme of investigation, and then they would then be assessed. So there isn't an objection in terms of archaeology, but we will make sure that they are those works are carried out as necessary.
Let me go backwards slightly here. Ultimately, this development proposal before you is contrary to the development plan. That is why it's before you on this occasion. Your delegation requirements require this to be presented to you as well. So the requirement in terms of the Town and Country Planning Act and so on is that the decision must be taken in accordance with the development plan unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. And in this occasion, we're saying, yes, your development plan says this, but we feel that there are material considerations in terms of the site, and we've also referenced the site not far away, that gives us cause to recommend to you that we should be taking those considerations into effect, which we have done. Circumstances are very similar, and therefore we are recommending approval. I think we have provided sufficient information for you to consider, and you have visited the site as well. We could go further and look at the planning history of various sites within Point Clear and assess the entire parish, but where do you draw a line, you know, how long a piece of string is? We think we've got sufficient information to give you the recommendation based on material considerations, and there are other material considerations within the report in terms of how we feel that this would not cause harm in planning terms, sufficient for us to recommend refusal in all other respects. However, if members so wish us to present further information on other matters, that will be for your debate and consideration, and I will be advised and instructed accordingly.
Councillor Everett, do you wish to come back on that? Any further comments, members? If not, I will be looking for a proposal. Councillor Smith?
I'm going to recommend for approval with the archaeological stuff that's asked for in there.
Councillor Smith and Councillor Goldman.
Like to second.
So it's a proposal from Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Goldman, and the recommendation is approval as per page 80, and I don't think there's anything on the update sheet. No, there isn't. So we'll go to the vote on that one, and this is for approval of this application as per the recommendation. So those in favour of approval, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that would be unanimous. This application is approved. I'll go and find Councillor White. It seems that our live stream is not quite as live as what we might think it to be. There's a bit of a delay. Okay. And our last application of the evening. So that's item 8 on the agenda, which is A425/00061/4, which is Clacton Rugby Club, Valley Road. And to present this item for us, Oliver again. Thank you, Mr. Ashford.
Thank you, Chair. So the application before members is at the Clacton Rugby Club on Valley Road, and is for proposed extension and alterations to provide further changing area, toilets and showers for rugby teams. The site should be familiar to members. There's a previous application that was heard in July of last year. So this is just a red line, outlines the site and the aerial view, giving the wider context of the site within Valley Road. So the site is located to the south of Valley Road and east of the railway line and west of the Clacton and District Indoor Bowls Club. The Vista Road Recreation Ground is located due south, which is a safeguarded open space. The site is located within the settlement development boundary for Clacton-on-Sea and contains a detached clubhouse with a small fenced area around. An existing cabin is already in place, which formed part of the previous application, and parking is available in the car park to the east of the site. However, this does not form part of the application site and predominantly serves the Clacton District Indoor Bowls Club. So just in terms of the site context, so there's a few photos here which show the previous context of the site, just to indicate that the part of the previous permission has been implemented but not fully. So this is looking towards the building itself with the existing porter cabin in place. Previously there was Harris fencing around the site. This is looking towards Valley Road with the site sloping down and the railway line to the west. And just in terms of the context, so you can see there's a green fence which has now been included as part of the application, which has now been implemented as part of the previous application that was on the site. And then this just shows in terms of a bit of context from further afield. In terms of what's being proposed, the area that we're looking at is a small area between the changing room and the existing facility, so I'll just highlight that with the laser here. And we received some revised plans which was part of the update sheet on Friday, which now show that the extension will not be connected to the two existing buildings, and this was partially because of the drainage on the site and to avoid any technicalities in terms of the building being unsafe. So that's the reason for the revised plans that have been submitted. And then this just shows the toilets and shower block as proposed. So in terms of policy HB2 seeks to deliver and maintain a range of new community facilities, and that new development should support and enhance community facilities by providing or contributing towards an enhanced community growth. The proposed development, which is required to support the operation and services provided the rugby club, is considered to align with the aims of policy HB2. In terms of construction, it's considered to be constructed with a timber frame and painted wood cladding. There's a mixture of development on site, but it's considered to be consistent with what's already on site. The proposals won't particularly be visible because of the location, apart from the railway line, which has a higher elevation, but it's not possible to provide any screening from this point. It's considered that the proposed design would not result in any long-term material harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area. For these reasons, the proposals before you are recommended for approval, and there are no further additions. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. There are no speakers on this item, and Oliver has already mentioned about the update sheet, which was also drawn to our attention this morning by the officer with us on the planning bus. So, members, questions for the officer on this one? Councillor Goldman.
Yeah, we visited this site a little while back, and we approved it then. And as far as I'm concerned, I would like to put forward and approve it again for the second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldman. Councillor Wiggins. Thank you, Councillor Wiggins. So we have a proposal for approval as per our papers on page 100, plus of course the update sheet, which is right at the bottom of the page, item number A4. So we have a proposal for approval and seconded. So that's Councillor Wiggins that seconded. So if I could have a show of hands to approve this application, please, members. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So that concludes our list of applications for this evening. Just leaves me to tell you the next planning meeting will be on the 1st of April. So, yes, indeed. So we can now turn off the live stream. Thank you, Chris.